Hello, Culture Matters. We're back again with another 30 days of thought. Here it is, page 112, 113. Here's a quote before I go into the excerpt. The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. Friedrich Nietzsche. I've misappropriated that quote in the past to Arthur Schopenhauer so many times, unknowingly. Then I think about Arthur Schopenhauer in some sense it's appropriate in the fact that one day Nietzsche was walking in a library, supposedly, and a book struck him. It stood out to him so clearly. It was almost as if he was meant to see it, as if, like, amor fati, as he has said and written about, love of one's fate. And he picked it up. I have it right here if you're watching on YouTube. One of these shelves right next to Warren and Charlie and Buffett's Grass. I've yet to finish it, but here it is. The World as Will and Idea, or The World as Will and Representation. 3 volumes in one, unabridged, by Arthur Schopenhauer. Nietzsche picked this up in his mid-20s. He had to be, yeah, 24, 25, or 26, maybe a little younger. I might be off on that. And it changed the trajectory of his life. According to Schopenhauer, Kant had a similar revelatory experience, and according to Kant, Hume, and I'm sure the list goes on, backwards through time. Kierkegaard once said, "Life can only be understood." Soren Kierkegaard, life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards. It's as if each philosopher, as Newton once said, is standing on the shoulders of giants so he could see farther. Right? Kant on Hume, Schopenhauer on Kant, Nietzsche on Schopenhauer. So many on Nietzsche, but if you listen to the Culture Runners podcast, at least 5% of the episodes, you'll catch up real quick that Dr. Peterson's influence on the show has been great. And he clearly speaks often and at length on Nietzsche, Beyond Good and Evil, and Thus Spoke that Zarathustra, and the gay science. And so, yeah, Nietzsche picks up this book, and apparently it impacts him, it shakes him to his very foundation. Just a light excerpt. The greatest, quote, the greatest value of rationale or abstract knowledge is that it can be communicated and permanently retained. It is principally on this account that it is so inestimably important for practice. Anyone may have a direct perceptive knowledge through the understanding alone of the causal connection of the changes and motions of natural bodies, and he may find entire satisfaction in it. But he cannot communicate this knowledge to others until it has been made permanent for thought and concepts. Knowledge of the first kind is even sufficient for practice if a man puts his knowledge into practice himself in an action which can be accomplished while the perception is still vivid. But it is not sufficient if the help of others is required, or even if the action is his own, but must be carried out at different times, and therefore requires a preconceived plan. Thus, for example, a practiced billiard player may have a perfect knowledge of the laws of the impact of elastic bodies upon each, merely in the understanding, merely for a direct perception, and for him it is quite sufficient. But on the other hand, it is only the man who has studied the science of mechanics, who has, properly speaking, a rational knowledge of these laws, that is, a knowledge of them in the abstract. Such knowledge of the understanding and perception is sufficient even for the construction of machines, when the inventor of the machine executes the work himself, as we often see in the case of talented workmen who have no scientific knowledge. But whenever a number of men, and the united action taking place at different times, is required for the completion of a mechanical work, of a machine or a building, and he who conducts it must have thought out the plan in the abstract, and such cooperative activity is only possible through the assistance of reason. And it goes on. It's a very powerful book, one of those more obscure authors, but his writing is beautiful, really, and enjoyable, although at times difficult. And that brings me to why I bring this up today, or why I think it's come up as a consequence of this excerpt from 30 Days of Thought, because I wasn't planning on bringing up Schopenhauer's work right here, or when I was reading my notes after doing the exercise, reading the excerpt, Caterpillar for Butterfly, writing my thoughts down. I wrote my thoughts down outside of the book in the remarkable technology. And my bullet, my bullet three stuck out, which was this quote: "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." And I remember mistakenly attributing this quote dozens of times to Schopenhauer when it's in fact Nietzsche, and followed my feeling of passion, picking up this book on the bookshelf and telling a story how Nietzsche was likely walking in a library, and all of a sudden this book popped out to him and challenged him, analogous to Kant's Critique of Pure Reason to Schopenhauer, and Hume's skepticism to Kant, or Hume's the fallacy of inductions. And I think I have Hume over here too. Might be downstairs. But anyway, definitely have Kant over there. I was walking once in a Barnes and Noble, telling not nearly as profound a book, but yet, at least in the grand scheme of culture and the humanities and the world, but in the same spirit, like Nietzsche walking in the library, I was walking Barnes and Noble, a place I would go when I was anxious and afraid and uncertain and anxiety ridden. I'd go to Barnes and Noble, and at the time we had a business I had co-founded, in the sense I was granted equity stock as a consequence of helping start it, with my credit being utilized, my personal credit, as well as raising the investor capital for this business. And we were in the thick of actually that one once upon a time vision of the visionary, the founder, and me as co-founder and essentially capital partner, in the thick of that once upon a time vision having come into reality. And I was crumbling under the pressure, frankly, living in the business, waking up before customers arrived, going to bed after they left. And I was at Barnes and Noble looking for answers, looking for clarity, looking for awareness. And a book popped out to me. I don't know why. I was walking through the store and it popped out to my right, my periphery. It's like I was walking, horizontally through the store, and it popped out to my right. And it was white and blue cover, and all of a sudden I picked it up and it said uncontainable. And like on the left-hand side, you open the book, you read the left-hand side of the book, where it explains a little bit about what the purpose of the book was. In 1978, Kip Tyndall started the Container Store to help people get more organized, and attributed a very high retention, so low turnover of employees, a higher per capita salary pay per employee, higher customer satisfaction, and so on. So much success to the seven core principles of the Container Store. The purpose of the Container Store was to help people get more organized. And I thought, what are our values? What do we stand for? How do we develop a culture like this? And that night, the day after, I came up with our company's values, and it, not long after, presented them to the team at melodramatic effect. People weren't so excited, but I got through to them. I found two things: the value of culture in the preceding months, and my passion for teaching, and my gift for uncovering the genius, whether it's of our guests or others, and ultimately myself, my own gift for learning, following my curiosity, and teaching. And that brings me, or has brought me, to the advisory world, the consulting world, and us as a consulting advisor partners or client partners to where we are today, where we have helped 11 outside of that first business, 11 companies. It's like very proud of that. I don't think about it enough. 11 companies, client partners, become more clear on what they stand for and what they stand against and where their vision is and where they're going and how they're going there and become revitalized, reintegrated or integrated, excited once again about their companies and have grown with the majority of all of 11 of these. If you listen to the show with regularity, you know that one of our client partners passed away on October 16th of 2024, John Schwartz. And that's tough to to lose that, but at the same time, to know that they put it all on the line and really grown and evolved, and we're in a better place, and now are in a much better place, you know, is more than something to be proud about. It's meaningful and beautiful, and it's tragedy. As for the other 10, we've been working with the majority for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and those that we aren't actively, we're very, very close, and there's always more work to be done. And I won't say more than that to keep it confidential. Um, but we go deep and wide, and it all started with that first, well, the longer story, it started before even that first business because I had been consulting a boutique gym in Tribeca, and before that had been in that gym business, cutting my teeth in sales and management and failing forward, as John Maxwell once said. But I bring all this up because, well, today we're talking about caterpillar, from caterpillar to butterfly. Here's the excerpt. We so easily limit ourselves and those around us with our perspective without the slightest realization of how we have come so far. Over the years, our dearest friends or oldest lovers may forsake us. Their lack of belief in our current state says more about them than us. But could it be our metamorphosis? See, that point, it's a half truth. If it says more about them than us, it's both. And could it be our metamorphosis? I have plenty in common with my enemies, with my adversaries of the past, because I also think that me back then wasn't as good as me today. So if I'm going to look back and say I've grown and I'm better, how am I going to keep this barb of resentment in my heart when I agree with those that didn't agree with me then, that I may have had conflicts in the past, my enemies, my adversaries? How could I live in that double thought, in that double mind? Quote, the journey we all partake in every day from caterpillar to butterfly. As the caterpillar changes eventually into its prime, we do not see, hear, or feel anything due to the speed of movement. And before we know it, the caterpillar is unrecognizable, and we turn back with regret or admiration. Who are those that in your life that you may have not believed in, that now have shown you differently? Who in your life did you believe in that became what you thought they would? And what about yourself? Those that didn't may not have believed in you. Look at you now. Are you capable of forgiving them or opening your door back up to them? And those that once believed in you, that you have become exactly what you thought they thought you'd become. What do those relationships look like? It goes for both sides of the coin, of the equation. Quote, when people transform, it is those closest to them who may not always notice first, since they are too close to see the transformation of growth. I think there's value in the fact that those closest to us may not recognize our growth, may not recognize where in us, in what we are, have become as perceived by the crowd, who have do not have a historical timeline with us of who we were in the past and how we showed up and how we didn't. There's a value in the friction. It creates an impulse to grow even more, to change even more. Just be careful not to let the impulse own you, right? Make you a slave in your perception of mastery. Because there's a lot, people lose friends, people lose family, people lose people as a consequence of those closest to them not seeing them for what they are versus what they were. And it's like that, it's something to be grateful for because that conflict, that interpersonal friction may actually create the energy necessary to go out and do something great. Quote, therefore, we must remind ourselves to be fully present every time so those around us can see through their lens, which may or not be clouded by their own cocoon. An antidote to the unbelief of those closest to us is actually to take a couple steps back, burden one's posture, burdens one's authority and his self-esteem, and lean in, be present, ask questions, make it about them. For example, last year I went, or this, yeah, last year at the end of the year, I wanted to go see old friends, and my focus was on them. My focus was to see how they were doing and what they were up to, not to fall into the weakest of my impulses and attempt to get acknowledgement or love and gratification by just bombastically proclaiming how I feel like I've accomplished something. And I thought it was a nice lunch. I'd like to see them again, and maybe in time it'll be more appropriate to share some of the wins. It was an enjoyable, the opposite of some of the thoughts out there. And I understand where this comes from. It's like, what do we have in common anymore if our what we value has changed? Well, we do have we do have the capacity to listen, to learn, to ask questions um, at whatever level of inquiry we're capable of. If I think especially if we're in a position of authority and greater influence and power, the onus falls on us to, especially if we think that we are, to lean in and be humble. Because ultimately that can create upward mobility for our counterpart. Quote, the people we surround ourselves with will build us up or knock us down, and they might be a determining factor of whether we fly. There's actually values are challenged and chiseled away and chiseled and improved in the falling down, in the tension, in the friction, in the conflict. Be grateful despite your suffering. Rule 12, beyond order. So yeah, the people that surround us will build us up or knock us down, but there's it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you just have people around you that build you up, now you're going to suffer from the yes man effect. You're going to suffer from it's going to lead to a political atmosphere. It's going to lead to lies and omissions or commit sins of omission and sins of commission, outward lies and repressed truths to build up and actually cloud the system. And that'll undermine innovation. It'll undermine the ability to think and to see what is true. It'll corrupt the person in a position of highest authority. If one is surrounded by only no people, it, it's going to reflect the strength of spirit of that individual. As Nietzsche once said, the spirit of an individual is based on how much truth they can handle, how much they diluted, muted, falsified, etc. So it's going to be a mixture of yes and no, and of course people are going to agree because they agree. Or, you've won them over. What's the story? What's the vision? What's the mission? What's the actual knowledge? Um, but this is where the balance of asking questions and telling the truth come in, and being curious and being empathetic and capable of taking feedback that contradicts one's vision is a sign of emotional, mental maturity. Quote, there will be occurrences and there will be actions. There will be hurt and pain, and these will restrict our wings. But restriction is not forever. Hurt and pain is not eternity, but momentous and eclipsing. Pain, hurt, think of it like the bow being drawn back. The farther it goes back and the more clear the aim is, we're closer to hitting not only the target, but a farther target. We need pain and suffering to have the interest in actually hitting a farther target and going for it. Quote, evolution is infinite, and with evolution, nothing or no one will prevent a purposeful butterfly to emerge from a caterpillar. End quote. And that's the excerpt. Purposeful butterfly. What is your purpose? What is your purpose and how are you acting it out? The purpose of the Culture Matters podcast is to uncover the genius of our guest. I do that by preparing before each episode and listening and following my curiosities to the best of my abilities when I have a guest. When I'm alone, I'm doing 30 Days of Thought. The purpose of this book, is to uncover the genius of the reader who becomes the writer and the speaker. And if you see the culture contents, I'm attempting to, like a butterfly, outgrow the cocoon that is 30 Days of Thought. And now there's all different series popping up on the Culture Matters podcast, from the Value Investor series, the 30 Days of Thought and Friends, to body language analysis with Janine Driver, cultural analysis with myself, yours truly, and so much more to come as a consequence of this caterpillar you are listening to and watching break out of the cocoon and flap my wings into the butterfly. Share this with a friend that's still a caterpillar, or a butterfly that thinks they're a caterpillar. Leave us a review in the Culture Matters podcast. We will see you next time.